This is going to be about task number 12, which is the accuracy off your dominant shoulder. You know, there's a lot of different interpretations by examiners in terms of how important are the loops. And I'll just tell you, there are some examiners, if you hit the targets pretty close, they're going to give you some leeway on the loops. But there's a lot of examiners that don't give you any leeway on the loops. So you need to practice loops, and you're going to see when I go showing how I teach this task, you're going to see how much emphasis I put on the loops and not as much emphasis on at least initially, not as much emphasis on the targets. A couple of expectations. One, you're supposed to hit a target within 16 inches of the center of the target. So that's one expectation. Honestly, if there's a pretty good breeze, like today, we've got an 8-mile-an-hour breeze at this point, and if that's the case, you may get a little bit of, a little bit of leeway on that. And the directions actually say that you should get some leeway if it's really windy, but it shouldn't really bother you that much unless that wind gets up like 15 or so. The other thing, you can't tick. If you make a false cast and you tick the grass, that counts as one of your attempts. And we'll go through the algorithm of the test in just a second, but you can't tick. The other thing they're looking for is they're looking for proper trajectory. So at 20-foot target, your trajectory is here. At 30 feet, your trajectory is here, and at 45 is here. You want to have a difference in trajectory as you make those different casts. So we'll talk about how to create that transition into those different trajectories. But overview, what we're going to do is we're going to start at 55 feet. So you're going to put your yarn at 55 feet. Then you're going to pull it back, and you're going to put your yarn in your hand, yarn in your finger. And you're going to make a cast to 20 feet and hit a target at 20 feet. Good loops and a nice trajectory. When you get down with 20 feet, assuming you hit it, then you're going to extend to 30 feet and do the same thing. If you miss 20 feet, you have to go back to putting the fly in the hand and do it again. Let's assume you get 3 chances, so you get 3 tries at 20 feet. Once you've made 20 feet, assuming you make 20 feet, you're going to go to 30 feet. Now you're going to make 3 tries at 30. If on any one of those tries you miss, then you have to bring the fly back, pull the fly back to 20 feet, pick it up, and now you don't pick it up in your hand, you just bring it back to 20 feet just like you'd hit the 20-foot target and start again. Then you start again with your false cast extending out to 30 and try to hit the target. Same thing at 45. You're going to extend from 30 to 45. If you miss at 45, you got to pull it back to 30, pick it up, extend it back to 45 and try it again. You get 3 tries. So that's the way that the task works, and we'll demonstrate that and show you how I teach that task. I want to make one thing kind of clear before we start. This task illustrates my philosophy more than any other single task. In 1973, I started coaching in high school, and I'd been coaching at the boys club and had some success. But in 1973, I went and watched John Wooden at UCLA run a practice session. And the impact that had on my coaching career, I can't even begin to tell you how impactful that was. The first thing he did, the first formal day when he had everybody together, he spent 20 minutes with his athletes talking about how to tie their shoes. That's how the detail that guy got into. He told those athletes that if your shoe comes untied during a game, you will not play the rest of the game. If it comes out untied twice during the season, you'll be suspended for a week. He didn't want anybody's shoes coming untied, and I guarantee you, at least I had never saw any UCLA athlete have his shoes come untied, because that was a tiny little detail, but the tiny details make a difference. And in a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, a lot of people, "Al, why are you bothering doing that? That just happens." I'll tell you the truth, it doesn't happen for a lot of athletes. There's a reason that most people take 2 to 3 years to pass the CI exam. I don't think there's any reason for that if a person can practice and if a person does it sequentially and does it right. Most of the students that I've had, I'd say 90% of them pass that test in the first year. And 90% of the people who take that test who have been my students pass on their first attempt. But that's because I really think that one of the things I've done is copy John Wooden's basic philosophy. There is no detail too small to practice. Every single thing you're going to do practices. In this one, there's probably at least 20, maybe 20 different sub-skills that are required to be able to do this task properly, and I believe you ought to practice every one of those 20 skills independently until you have them right, and then you can put it all together. So we're going to talk about the way I do it, the sequence we do it in, and why we do it. So let's talk about the algorithm that I use to teach this task. And it's not going to be in the same order as the task itself, but it's going to be designed to create or develop one skill and then add another skill to that skill and add another skill to the first two skills and so on. So that's the idea. The idea is not to proceed to the next step until you've already finished the previous steps with pretty high degree of success. So the first thing we're going to do, you've already had, and you're not going to be able to see this because the camera's only set to the first cone, but my fly has been out to 40 feet for the previous tasks, which were the roll cast at 40 feet. So the first thing I have to do is get my fly to 55 feet because that's where I got to start. So what I do, and I practice this to make sure I can do it nice and neatly, because I tell you, when I watch people take this test and they're flopping around, they get to 39 feet and then they get to 46 feet and then they get to 51 feet. It takes them forever. Just get yourself a nice system. This is the one I use. I strip off 6 big strips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 6 big strips should get me to 55 feet. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick it up nice and neatly. 1, 2, 55 feet. So I've gone to 55 feet nice and neatly, very cleanly, and I know it's 55 feet. Actually, that was like 56 because my poles were a little big, but that's fine. Now what you have to do is you have to pull your fly in. So you're going to pull your fly in to fly in hand. So we're just going to pull it in, stack your line nice and neatly someplace where you're not going to step on it during the course of the test. Right here. So I just stack my fly, my line nice and neatly. Now what I do is I bring my fly back until my line is about half the length of my rod. So there's my fly line, it's about half the length of the rod. You can see I've got a breeze that's blowing between 6 and 10 or 12 miles an hour into my back. So I turn and I face this way. This is something you can practice. Don't sit there and do this, trying to get your fly while the examiners are watching you, fuddle around. Turn, get your fly nice and neatly in your hand, and turn back. Now, speaking of the flag, as far as the wind is concerned, if I'm facing you right now, I like the wind coming into my opposite shoulder just a little bit. So this wind is actually almost directly behind me. But I don't like a really bad crosswind because then I have a hard time getting my fly laterally to land near the cone. The disadvantage of this wind is if it's gusting hard is your back cast, especially on a 20-foot back cast, might get blown a little bit because there's just not enough line to bend the rod and create enough strength in the cast. But that's what I do with the wind. So you'll have to decide, but every time you want the wind blowing in the same direction when you practice this. The other thing you want is you want your leader to be exactly the same length. My leader is always right at 8 feet. I like a big piece of yarn so I can see it well. You may want a smaller piece of yarn. I'm willing to put up with a little bit of wind in the back with the big yarn in order to get so I can see this thing at 45 feet especially. The next thing is I put my foot, my casting arm foot, I put my toe right on the end of the tape. If your examiners have set the cones off the tape a little bit, I line my foot up exactly with that cone. Then what I'm doing, for me personally, I like the finger on top grip like this. If for my shorter distances, and then for the longer distance, I'll often go to the thumb on top. But I like this. I like to line my rod up and my shoulder right on the tape, on the forehand thing. Now you hold the fly, and now what you want to do is you want to practice a nice pickup. So this is not a nice pickup. That's not a nice pickup. Again, look what I'm doing. I'm practicing doing this. Nice and clean, even with all that wind. A pickup means, here, you think about what kind of casting arc you're going to need. This is your casting arc for 20 feet right here. So first I'm going to practice just the pickup. Just this. Turn. Grab your fly in your hand and practice. So it's flipped a little bit, so I need to get it back on the other side. Right here. Nice and easy. Don't go back and forth like a crazy person. Nice and easy. Good strokes. Now what I'm going to do, the next thing I'm going to do when I've got that wired, I'm just going to set my fly at 20 feet. So it's at 20 feet, and you're going to see my rod tip. This is about where I stop my rod tip on all of my casts. So I'm going to stop my rod tip in the same place, about a foot above the ground on all of the tasks, every one of those cones that I shoot to. Now all I'm going to do is practice 20 feet, pickups, the right trajectory. I'm not worrying about the target. I'm worrying about my loops. You've got to get to where you automatically understand what these loops are doing. And you notice my rod is going almost to 12 o'clock. From 10 to 12 is all this is right here. Just nice and relaxed. Once I've done this and I'm pretty good at it, it's automatic. Now I'll start aiming for the cone. Got it. Got it. Little bit short, about 3 inches. Now remember, you can be within 16 inches and be fine. Perfect. And I'm going to do this a bunch of times until I can nail that cone. Then I'm going to go back, start the whole thing over again, get to this point. Now at this point, I've got to feed to 30 feet. So what I'm going to do, again, it's out of order, but I want to know what it feels like to cast 30 feet. So I'm just going to take my line, and next practice thing I do is just forget about extending to 30 feet. By the way, if you miss 20 feet, you've got to pull it back to fly in hand and start over again. You get 3 tries. So if you miss 20 feet, you got to pull it back to fly in hand in 3 tries. So now I'm at 20 feet, but I'm just going to skip the feed section. I'm just going to go to, there's 30 feet. What I'm going to practice at 30 feet is a good pickup and nice loops at 30 feet. So now what I'm going to do, I've hit 20, I know what that feels like. I'm just going to get it to 30. Just throw the fly out to 30. Now just practice 30 feet. Over and over and again, good pickups, because you're going to need a good 30-foot pickup when you go from 30 to 45. So you're going to use a good pickup right here. Rod's in about in the same place, about a foot off the ground, flies right at 30 feet. Now all I'm going to try to do is get used to what it feels like at 30 feet. Practice your pickup. Now good trajectory at 30 feet. Good loops. Don't hurry. Just practice 30 feet so you know what this feels like. Recognize where your rod is. Now it's at like 12:30. Maybe almost 1 o'clock in the back. Still close to 10 in the front. All I've done is extended my arc in the back. Memorize this. I shouldn't have to even look at my loops now to know that I'm close to 30. Once I've got this down, now I start aiming for the 30-foot cone. Got it. Got it. Hit it. Once you feel pretty good about this, pull it back to 20, and now you've got to extend from 20 to 30. That's the next skill, or that actually is not the next skill. It's out of order, but this is the skill we ought to do it in, because now I'm familiar with what 30-foot feels like. I'm familiar with the loop feels like, what it looks like. I'm familiar with the trajectory. So now I'm going to pick up 20 feet nice and neat. And you can pick it up with the fly. Now you don't have to have the fly the line in your rod hand. You can actually have it in your line hand as you're extending line. I'm going to have the same trajectory until I get good loops. Then I'm going to adjust my trajectory to 30 feet. So you noticed I just changed from this trajectory to this trajectory. Now I'm going to feed 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And I found from experience, I had to do a little more because of the wind back there, 3. From experience, that's pretty much what I need to do to get to 30 feet. Now I'm going to put it into one hand. This is another skill. So I don't lose my loops. My loops are pretty good. I want to maintain my loops. Right there. Practice that skill. right there. Transfer hands, make the transition without losing your loops. Now I'm going to go back to aiming at my target. Remember, I've been there before. I think I'm a little bit short. So what I'm going to have to do is lean forward on my delivery cast. Got it. Hit it within 3 or 4 inches. So that's what I'm doing when I get to 30. Now, I've done 20 and I've done 30. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to practice the 45-foot distance. So we've gone to 55 feet, back to flying hand. We've practiced 20, we've gone from 20 to 30, and now we have to go from 30 to 45. And we're gonna do the same thing we did before. We're gonna work at 45 first, get nice loops, aim at the target, get to feel what a 45-foot loop should look like and what it feels like. By the way, it's a good time to talk about wind. If you can see this little ribbon, we've got a wind right now that's gusting from almost nothing to 18, or even there's a few gusts that are really bad, 20 miles an hour. You've been asked in this test to cast slow to medium speed, which is perfectly good. But if you've got a 15-mile-an-hour wind behind you, you can't cast slow to medium or you're not going to get a back cast. It's going to collapse and you won't have a forward cast. So the rule is you want to cast as slow as you possibly can and still maintain the integrity of the loop. So here just came one of those gusts. You can take a look at that. That's a good 15-mile-an-hour gust right now. It's really blowing. And if I try to slow cast right now, I can't make a forward cast. So I'm going to go ahead and do this task, and I would probably wait till the gust is over if this was a test, but I'm going to do it just to make a point here about the speed of my loops. So make a nice pickup and then get your 45-foot loops, get used to your trajectory and also your speed and the size of your loops and your casting arc. Okay, 45 feet. Try to get good loops. Get your trajectory, think about where your arc is, where your rod stops in the front and back. Now start thinking about your target. Don't tick. Bingo, hit the target. You just do that again and again and again and again until you get it right. Okay, so now we have to go from 30 to 45 feet. We're going to use exactly the same algorithm that we used from 20 to 30 feet. We're going to pick it up with 2 hands. In other words, I've got a line hand now. I'm going to do nice trajectory at 30 feet until I get my loops right. I'm going to adjust my trajectory to 45 feet. I'm going to extend line to 45 feet. And then I'm going to put line in one hand. I'm going to make sure my target is right. I'll make some adjustments with my feet if I need to. If I think I'm maybe a foot short, I'll lean when I make my delivery cast. If I think I'm a bit long, I might move back a little bit to make my delivery cast. So let's just do this. So we're at 30 feet and we now have to go back to 45 feet. We've practiced 45 feet. We have a pretty good idea what those loops feel like and where that target is. So here we go. Line in hand, 2 hands, nice pickup. Good loops at 30 feet trajectory. Go to 45-foot trajectory. 1, 2, 3. Good loops. Put fly in one hand. Don't tick. Target. Got it. Just a little bit short. I don't know, I can't really see it. I might have been a 1.5 feet short, so I'd go back to 30 feet. I'd do the whole thing again. That time I got it. So I'm about maybe 8 inches beyond it and 8 inches to the side, but that would do it. So there is task number 12.